everyone. This is update for June 8, 2024, day 836 of the war and of the date update. This is also catch up since June 2nd. I apologize. I had some personal situation I need to attend, and then I'm returning back to the normal schedule, pending obviously this personal situation sort of rearing its ugly head again. But let me start, as always, with general strategic updates, and then I'm going to switch to the walk through the battlefield and generally discuss strategic military situation in Ukraine and potentially Russia. So let's first start with the world economic situation, and there was a lot of data that came out of the US this past week, and I would like to discuss it as I think there are some picture emerging. It's still a little bit muddy, I would say, but I think there is some, I would say, plausible theory can be sort of constructed out of this data. First, the US manufacturing in PMI, it's negative, as you can see. It's getting worse. It's ISM. It stands for Institute for Supply Management. There is competing from S&P, and it actually did not support ISM numbers. Actually went in opposite direction, which is never good sign. It's I would say, sign of muddy picture that there is some discrepancy, that there is something else going on that we may not be understanding. But if we look at the ISM manufacturing number, what is interesting is that employment numbers are up quite significantly in the positive territory to 51.1, yet manufacturing new orders are down significantly, as you can see, to 45.4 from 49. So it's a significant contraction. And in general, this new orders is the most important part of this metric, because this new orders tells you it's a leading indicator where the economy is going in terms of manufacturing and where it's heading. And it's very clear, very negative sign. It's extremely negative. What could be sort of, how this can be explained is that U.S. economy is losing its productivity, efficiency, and it takes simply more people to manufacture same things. And it might be this case of basically onshoring manufacturing, and it's very expensive. It's very inefficient in the US, which is what was the reason in the first place why it left the US. And those conditions didn't change. So there's this rosy glass pictures that, okay, we're just going to bring it back and everything's going to be normal. It's going to be huge, severe disappointment because the manufacturing base left US for a reason. It didn't happen because on a whim of people, they had no choice to survive. And those conditions in the US have not changed. So this might be sort of sign of this attempts to bring back manufacturing, but it's not really working out because it's expensive, basically, and that's why it's not supported by new orders. If we move a little bit to the service part of the economy, it's called ISM non-manufacturing. As you can see here, it went into sort of sharply up from 49 to 53.8. It's quite significant sharp move up, and it also there is sort of, I guess, a healthy component is that the most important one is that new orders up. This is what I was talking about in manufacturing, where they significantly down for roughly 4 points. Here they roughly up 2 points. That's positive. It also pulling employment up, which is sort of also logical. It's still in contraction zone, but it's becoming less negative. Um, the say negative out of this is service part of economy. It doesn't really produce much, and it's just generally redistribution of things that are already being produced. And this is not a sign of generally healthy economy where it's already skewed in the US in the service side significantly. There's very little manufacturing left, and sort of picture is becoming even more distorted in that way. Um, then, if we look at another jobs indicator, is job openings and labor turnover survey. It's called JOLTS for short. The and it's also leading indicator of hiring trends of new hires by the companies. And as you can see, the market there has been cooling significantly. So now it shows roughly 8 million job openings in US. Just for comparison, during the sort of the boom time in 2022, when there were total labor shortage, those job openings would be somewhere above 11 million, roughly like 11.5, 11.8, or somewhere in that ballpark. And it's slowly been going down as interest rates were going up, which is very logical. So now it's at 8 million. And sort of normal number for the US prior to COVID was roughly somewhere between 7 to 8 million. So it's basically the job market is getting into sort of balance where this is normal sort of number of job openings in the US, and it's becoming more balanced. I'm not saying it's there, but it's getting very close. Interesting part about these job openings is that all of the job openings were in small companies. You can see 1 to 9 employees is the most of it, and 10 to 49 employees is the rest of it. All of the larger companies above 50 employees, they actually they reduced the number of their job openings. So in some ways, it's actually a positive sign generally, because it's a sign that small business is growing, and that's really blood of the economy and healthy society. So this is obviously just one off. So I'm not saying that this is generally a trend, but there is positive in this cooling off labor market, that it appears to be cooling off in somewhat healthy way, where actually small companies are growing, and as I stated, that they will provide basis for healthy economy going forward. So the another data point that sort of confirming the situation that the labor market is starting to cool down in the US is ADP, private employment report for May. It grew only 152,000 jobs or new hires. Usually it would be closer to 200 when when the economy is moving fast, and it's about 200, 220, 30, and so on. So we can see that this number of new hires is definitely on the lower end, which again ties with the job openings, that there is that the U.S. companies are hiring fewer, or there's less desire to hire new employees. Also, going back to this, which is sort of not supporting numbers from those PMIs, is that manufacturing employment actually shrunk by 20,000. So again, this goes back, but it actually confirms this whole picture of that this rebuilding manufacturing base in the US really doesn't kind of work. It apparently hits all sorts of obstacles. Most of them are regulatory obstacles and so on, and it's not going smooth and healthy. And I think it's not going to work in the long run, unless there are drastic changes in the U.S. Then, if we look at the continuing jobless, that's another important data point. It remains in what is under 1.8 million, which is sort of normal number. And in initial jobless claims, also normal numbers. So doesn't show exploding layoffs. This two numbers, what they sort of tell us is there are no exploding layoffs. So basically, if you kind of combine all of this, starting from jobs, ADP, and this continuing jobless claims, situation is that companies in US are very hesitant to hire. They're not really willing to hire. At the same time, yet they're not laying off people. So there's sort of kind of like a balance and maybe a turning point in the US job market where we may or may not see a spike in layoffs down the road, because it's never sort of perfect situation. And what this really means is that US Federal Reserve may actually reduce rates, caving to this labor market, because one of the mandate that they have is full employment and low inflation, essentially, which, well, technically no inflation, but they redefined that goal to low inflation of 2%. So this double mandate is actually unrealistic in general. It's a flawed idea in the first place, because you can have sometimes you will have both in problematic like stagflation, and it still may very well happen. So what I'm trying to say is that they may try to reduce rates sooner than later, and it will still lead to job losses and spike then in inflation. So it may bring actually worse of both worlds. And at the same time, I can totally understand they're trying to save employment, and it's very logical. And especially it's election year in US, there is pressure to keep employment for the current president to win. Obviously, it's not going to help him to win if there is spike in unemployment. Now I'm actually just gonna look at this non-farm productivity and unit labor costs, which are all linked together, and you can see that non-farm productivity is basically almost non-existing, and it's driven by unit labor costs that are going up 4%. So this is going back to the prior situation that I mentioned, that US lost its edge in efficiency and productivity, and that's why there's a problem with onshoring manufacturing base, because current structure of the economy of society cannot sustain manufacturing basically in the US, and that's just a reality of it. Then last numbers are non-farm payrolls, which are actually on a higher end. So basically, there is significant increase in employment there. This is just one of the data points. So it actually goes against the idea of this job openings, ADP. So that's why I say that this generally picture is not crystal clear. It's somewhat muddy, but there are certain trends that I think I'm trying to explain. And then unemployment rate slowly but surely is going up in the US. I think it was in low 3% a year ago, so now it's 4%. But that's sort of expected as a result of increasing interest rates and cooling off of labor market, generally economy. So as I said, there is in general, U.S. labor market is still holding on. So as long as labor market is still holding on in U.S., there's very unlikely any kind of recession. There is any. It's very unlikely that there is a large scale any kind of let's say decline in housing markets. Although in U.S. there are also signs in certain sectors, certain regions of the U.S. that the housing prices started to decline, and things are turning worse. But it's not universal situation. It's more so far limited to certain areas, so like Florida, typical areas where it's sort of pump and dump type of places. So I would say, as I stated, it's Florida. I think there are rumors there are problems in like Austin, Texas. So and also problems starting to build up in Arizona. So all typical places, as I stated, pump and dump places. They sort of forces of gravity bringing them back, and they would be first to be brought back. The same was in 2000, six, seven, and eight, where all of these places they were losing value first, and then the rest followed essentially. So. At the same time, it's still not very clear that this is really happening. Because as I said, as long as labor market is still okay, it's not perfect. There is no question about it, and it's sort of trends generally, moving it in a negative direction. But for now, there is no obvious large scale damage in that part of the economy. So I think, generally speaking, economy is still gonna sort of move along. Let's put it this way. Now let's actually move to European Union, and central bank there actually already started reducing interest rates from 4.5 to 4.25, and the same is actually happening in Canada. So this really another data point that we sort of moved through inflection point, and now the economy is starting to be feeling a little bit too tight everywhere, and obviously it's European Union is weaker link, and apparently Canada too. So they started their interest rate cutting first because they are concerned about their labor market apparently, and it's on the brink there. So they started easing to in the hope that that will help labor market. What it unfortunately will do, it's also will increase inflation, and that's going to be a problem, and it may as it may lead to repeat of this 2022. In some ways, it's what we kind of going through, very similar to 70s, where it was also a similar situation, spike in inflation, some increase in interest rates, then economic conditions worsen, then easing interest rates, then even bigger spike in inflations, then spike in unemployment. So it led to kind of like really disastrous picture towards the end of 70s in the West, and then you needed really high interest rates in like middle teens to really rein in inflation. And inflation is really driven by, for the most part at this point, government spending, which I will talk that this monthly statement hasn't come out. I think it's going to come out on Monday. So then, I'll look into what's going on in the U.S. Government finances. Now I'm going to switch to the situation in Ukraine, and then I'm going to discuss a little bit Russia afterwards. So first, I already spoke about this person. Her last name is Bezugla, Maria Bezugla. She's kind of like a commissar of the sort of those communist sort of coup or revolution time. in the Soviet Union. So she's playing the same actually role for Ukrainian president. So what she does, she goes to the front line, obviously finds tons of problems, all sort of things, and then she puts the blame. She complains. She blames Minister of Defense, Minister the all sort of military top, head of Ukrainian army. This newly appointed General Syrskyi. So now she's calling for his dismissal and so on. Basically, the same allegations that were raised against prior head of Ukrainian military, Zaluzhny. They basically resurfacing, and sort of she's doing that the same thing against General Syrskyi and some other people involved. And so what is really she's doing, she's not really doing it because she, out of kindness of her heart. So what she is, she's, as I stated, a commissar, and this really means that the commissar goes and politically controls military, because the political top is disconnected from the military, is not respected by the military, is largely hated by the military, and so they need some kind of like there's mistrust. So they need to send the political Ukrainian president sends its political envoy to check on the military situation. And this serves the reason then, if things are not going well, then the scapegoat becomes head of Ukrainian military. Now it's General Syrskyi. And she's openly calling for his dismissal, which probably may happen, and then there will be a new person, and there's rinse and repeat. So what this allows Ukrainian president to basically deflect the blame to whoever is the head of Ukrainian military. So it's kind of like a disposable toilet paper. It gets dirty, you throw it away, you get new one, and you get it dirty and throw it away, and all of the sort of political negativity goes towards this head of the military. It doesn't work perfectly, and I think with General Zaluzhny, it didn't really work at all. Because he was popular generally. I don't agree with general assessment that he was good. He was not good. He's not any better than the current one. Nevertheless, he had popular support. This one doesn't have anything, neither popular support nor sort of political support from Ukrainian president at this point. So he's going to be really easy to get rid of, and then install new one, blame the new one, and this person is basically instrumental in creating this system of deflecting all of the failures of Ukrainian president towards Ukrainian military, because in the end, all of responsibility for all of the problems for the society generally not functioning is on Ukrainian president, because he also controls Ukrainian parliament at the same time. So if he wanted, he could quickly fix all of these problems, but he doesn't do that. He decides instead, basically, find scapegoats, and then she's basically instrumental in doing that. So again, probably sort of some new dysfunctional situation coming towards the Ukrainian military, which is there. It's already dysfunctional, so there's gonna be even more chaos, and that's the whole point of Ukrainian president, is to rule by chaos, to creating chaos. It allows him to stay in power, and that's very primitive but frequently working strategy until disaster, where this strategy is leading, his personal strategy leading to disaster of the entire country. So another important point that she actually admitted was through scandals, and this is one of the sort of attacking points of hers, is that Ukrainian troops lost Robotyne some time ago. And then also that they withdrew from Krynky, this Ukrainian bridgehead on the eastern side of Dnipro River. I mentioned that about months ago that there were rumors, but I could not confirm. So now she's formally confirming that Ukrainian troops withdrew from there. And the story is exactly what I was reporting at that time, is that Ukrainian command needed more resources to defend Kharkiv, so they pulled 36 Naval Infantry Brigade from this area, and then therefore you cannot hold on to that bridgehead anymore. So you kind of like straighten your front line, and so that's the result of it. So just confirms what happened roughly months ago. So now let's move to another example of failure of Ukrainian president. And what's happening is the Ukraine simply doesn't have enough electricity. The electricity generation is not where it's needed. It's roughly at 25% of the needs. And what's happening, it starts to paralyze and destroy society. It's really at the core where you really cannot survive in any meaningful way. And in this example, the passenger trains were shut down because they run on electricity. There's not enough, and so it basically disintegrates country into islands, essentially, physically, not through electricity, but physically, because you don't have this trains running, passenger trains. And this is just a small example. This is the same is happening throughout the economy. Businesses cannot continue working. They're attempting to use power generators, but the cost of electricity is through the roof, is extremely expensive as a result. And they simply will not be able to survive. This is sort of last-ditch effort to survive, but majority of them will not. And if this situation continues, and there's no reason it won't, probably by the fall, it will be very disastrous economic situation in Ukraine. In terms of both income revenue generation and tax revenue generation for Ukrainian government, and then having really huge unemployment, and to the point that probably there will be need for some sort of call it like universal military income, because simply there won't be realistic employment opportunities in the Ukrainian economy, and there is no ability to leave the country for for military age men. So and that's going to be very combustible situation. And this may mean that there may need to be more financial support from the West in order to pay this some basic income, because otherwise it may lead to what I called 1917 moment. And this is obviously part of the Russia's strategy, Russia's plan to really bring Ukrainian society in untenable conditions sometime in the fall. Because head of Ukrainian power generation grid already stated that in the fall there will be, in 24 hours, people may receive electricity for about 2 to 4 hours, at best 8 hours. So you can imagine you simply cannot properly function in terms of if you're a business. It's basically the entire society shuts down and switching to subsistence mode, and that's where it's all heading. This is just we're at the very beginning of it. Now I'm going to switch a little bit towards actually different topic, and this topic is the losses of both sides, Ukraine and Russia, in this war. And I mentioned this before. Numbers that are presented by by military officials on both sides are complete lies, and both are reporting something like 500,000 dead. Ukrainian military claims killing 500,000 Russians, and Russians claiming something similar, 500 killed Ukrainians, and all of this is complete, total lie, and like not just lie by a little, but lie in stratosphere, basically, by both sides. So, and it's really hard. None of the sides are producing any reliable information. There's just anecdotal information that I mentioned this before, and I'd say that the losses on both sides do not exceed 200,000 dead. But this is obviously very, how to say, estimate with high probability for error. Let's put it this way, but not in the or not on the higher side, but it actually could be, let's say, 150 or something like that. There was, first of all, there was one interesting data point from Ukrainian official who stated that Ukraine needs 110,000 people to fill its ranks in 2024. So this gives us some kind of proxy of the losses per year, and doesn't mean that 2023 were the same, and 2022 may not be the same. But if we extrapolate, giving that there is nothing better, so there is, we can say that out of 110, probably 30,000 dead, maybe 40,000. So from that perspective, Ukrainian losses and Russian something similar, around 100,000 dead. So that's probably on the lower end for both sides, I would say. So the minimum, there's definitely 100,000 dead on both, for each side of the conflict. And then there is also interesting information that came from Russia this time. So this is showing statistics for people who lost their, let's say, legs or arms and so on, and they need some wheelchair and things of that nature, and the they need artificial hands and legs and so on. So this number in Russia increased 137,000 in 2023 alone. So as you can see, there was not a huge spike in actually 2022, but 137. So this is more like a number of the wounded sort of soldiers, and mostly it's probably driven by the war. As you can imagine, there is a huge spike. That's roughly we can also translate that. We can say that there is 200,000 wounded. That really means that at most there is 80,000 dead. So that really brings us to roughly number of like 200,000 dead. So this is kind of like two data points between 100 and 200 of dead, roughly, and that's most realistic, and the real number somewhere in between those two numbers. So that's the best assessment of the losses on both sides, and I mean dead people. Obviously, the wounded and everything is much larger number as we can imagine. So hopefully that little bit helps. And before I jump to Ukraine, there's another interesting number for Russian economy, for Russian military economy. Actually, two pieces of it is mentioned this before, that Russian political top is actively building out military producing capacity in Russia, and they made significant progress. So in this, part of the reason of industrial production going up in Russia is actually a result of military equipment production. So it's not really productive, application, but it drives expenses, and it's in manufacturing space, industry space, so that really drives industrial production in Russia, and actually one of the reasons why the unemployment rate is extremely low at, I think, 2.6%, because military economy needs people, and so there were some numbers that were mentioned by a high-ranking Russian official, is that they hired 500,000 people into the military production facilities since the beginning of the war, and then they planned to bring it to, in the near future, to 700,000 people. So this is really significant number, given that Russia's working age population is less than 70 million, probably more like 60 million. So this number is roughly close to 1%. That's a significant, I would say, increase, draw of resources from general economy. And also another part of it is that the salaries went up 2 times at the minimum for average worker employed in this military industrial complex, so which is obviously tells you where the government is putting their resources. The other interesting part in terms of build out of Russian military industrial complex is actually not just in Russia. So they outsource some of the production to Belarus. This is the country north of Ukraine, and Belarus just opened new facility in Orsha. It's not shown here. It's a little bit up north of Smolensk on the border with Russia. So that facility is now producing apparently 152, 122 millimeter shells, and also rockets for 122 millimeter rockets for multiple rocket launcher, typical for the Soviet army. So as you can see, Russia is actively involving Belarus. It's part of it's effectively one country. It just has sort of 2 faces because it's convenient on the international arena, and that's how it's being played there. Now I'm gonna actually switch. Before I jump to actually Ukraine, I just want to mention another thing that's going on is this, I would say, ping pong of escalation between US on one side, and obviously the rest of the West, and then also Russia and China. And you can see this threatening talks from high-ranking Chinese stating that they're gonna capture Taiwan and so on, and they threaten, and in response, U.S. is saying that they're gonna send troops to Taiwan. So this ping pong going, the escalation ping pong goes higher and higher in terms of rhetoric, which is obviously dangerous, and generally this escalation is going so far in the dangerous direction. Then US was doing drills with tactical nuclear bombs and flying around. So obviously and changing its military, its nuclear strategy by deciding to increase the number of nuclear warheads and so on, so it can deal simultaneously with China and Russia and North Korea. It's definitely not going to be easy. Then Russia is threatening with tactical nuclear weapons in retaliation, and then it's sending its tiny fleet with nuclear submarine to Cuba. And then Venezuela, so basically trying to poke U.S. In the south, where it's somewhat vulnerable, Things clearly going from, I would say, bad to worse, let's put it this way. And this is just general trend. Hopefully, this escalation ping pong stops, and and we're not going to go head into World War III in terms of like it being nuclear, because that's going to be the worst. Now I'm actually going to switch to the situation in Ukraine, and as a general note, uh, things are not great for Ukrainian army. For reasons I explained before, it's totally not fault of regular Ukrainian soldiers, totally fault of Ukrainian political top, because that's who sets the tone, and then it's basically trickle down to everywhere, and creating problems. And it's becoming more and more obvious for the sort of people on the front line who actually uh, um, fight with Russians, that Ukraine is losing its competitive edge in terms of innovation and quickness of innovation. In past, Ukraine was ahead of Russia, and that's part of the reasons Ukraine was able to defend itself successfully initially. Not the only one, but one of the main ones. Now it's turned into completely rigid bureaucracy that really destroys um, initiative at the bottom level, and that really is turning into a big problem for Ukrainian army. In addition to all other problems, so this is not the only problem. That's just another problem on top of many more problems there. Now I'm actually gonna switch to the walk through the front line in a clockwise fashion, the way I always do. So first we're gonna jump to the situation near Kharkiv, east of Kharkiv or northeast of Kharkiv. Things there are stable in the way that Ukrainian command has thrown its, I would say, last reserves to basically push back Russian troops, or stop them and attempt to push them back. And it's not stable situation. So it's basically, as long as Ukrainian command has resources to throw in, to burn, the situation will be stable. As soon as it loses that ability, or the new replacements which are of much lower quality will be coming, things will start to unravel. So at the same time, Russian command also does not have free resources to throw into the battle here. So it may just kind of stagnate for a while here until either side has some decisive strategic advantage, or, for example, Russia does large-scale mobilization, which Russian president completely denied the need for it. At the same time, people sort of on the ground in Russian army saying completely different story. I would say probably people on the ground I would trust more than what Russian president says. But generally speaking, Russian army sort of doesn't have enough resources for major attack, or for even development of limited success that they had here. So let's just look at the situation. For this reason, this whole advance stalled for now, and there's no real advance by Russian troops. They're actually losing their positions in some areas, so there's no more question about capturing Lipsy, which was key position, so it's in Ukrainian hands. So that really secures strategically Kharkiv for now. And then in Vovchansk, Ukrainian troops managed to basically push back Russian troops out of the core. The situation is sort of fluid, but largely I would say now Ukrainian troops are controlling the core of the town. Basically this center of the town on the northern side of the river, That's why I'm not updating. I just essentially the front line hasn't changed since May 18. Now let's move to the situation on the North Luhansk front line. Things here are, I would say, the same, except there's problem on Ukrainian side where you getting lower quality replacement that where, as I stated before, people are not willing to sacrifice their life to just stand the ground. So, and Russian troops are just doing their primitive squeeze, and in some places, sometimes they're lucky, they're successful, and in this case, they were successful. They captured village Ivanivka, where I show this kind of like salient that was built up. Otherwise, situation more or less stable on the rest of the front line here. Again, this is not a major breakthrough towards Kupyansk. It's just squeeze that's not gonna lead to any strategic consequences. Let's put this way. In the immediate way, it's a long story. Let's put this way. Now let's look at the situation on the North Donbas section of the front line. The northern one also remains in more or less the same situation. Russian troops continuing their attempt to capture Bilohorivka without terribly much success. Otherwise, there's nothing strategic happening here. It's very clear the Russian troops' objective here is this town Siversk, but it's far from from where Russian troops want to be. Then situation in west of Bakhmut. Russian troops essentially so far pressuring. There is no major breakthrough there. It's just, again, the same kind of squeeze that's happening everywhere. The same kind of pressure. There are claims that Russian troops were thrown back from their little bridgehead that they captured on the western side of this Siversky Donetsk freshwater channel, north of Chasiv Yar that I showed before. I'm talking about this village Ivankivka. There are claims that it was recaptured by Ukrainian troops. I don't have that independent confirmation, so I'll leave it as a question mark. And given the general sort of trend, this Russian troops at some point soon will be back where, if they lost it, which I'm still not clear, not sure, they will be back where they were. And this really means that the fate of Chasiv Yar is definitely sealed in a negative way for Ukraine. It's just a question of time. But from a timing perspective, Russian troops are still very, very far away from capturing Chasiv Yar. They need to build the pincer north of this town, and in the south of it, and it's still long away from where it needs to be. Now let's move to the situation on the central Donbass front line, where things are sort of the worst, I would say, overall. There's very heavy Russian pressure, as I mentioned before, in this kind of like a passage between that's along this railroad line, and they putting a lot of pressure in this area where I'm showing between Novoalexandrivka and Sokil. Both villages being heavily attacked and pressured. Russian troops already attacking Ukrainian troops in both Novoalexandrivka and Sokil. So basically fighting is going on for these villages, which gives you impression that Russian troops are slowly but surely advancing there. How long Ukrainian troops going to be able to hold this passage remains to be seen, but this is sort of strategically important from this local perspective, right? So not just for entire front line, but locally, that's the most strategic and important part of this section of the front line. There is some fight south of it. Russian troops are not terribly eager to clear up this territory because it's essentially blocked by this small river and then pond. So if Russian troops manage to break through towards progress and further west, this territory will sort of fall into their hands naturally, so they don't need to waste their resources there. Now let's look at the situation a little bit south of where I showed, and Russian troops are on outskirts of Kharkivka, which is, I would say, very small, tiny town around this pond south of them on this road. So they're moving there as well. So this is another sort of strategically important direction. So as I showed, the northern one here from Ocheretino towards west, and then the other one through Kharkivka again also towards west. And they moving forward slowly but surely in both on both sides of this sort of attack. Then, if we'll move south, Russian troops are so far still stuck in Krasnohorivka. They haven't made much advances there. They making some small advances and moving forward here west of Novomikhailivka, closer to this road. Nothing terribly major there, but just sort of natural loss of the front line, which kind of became natural for Ukrainian side. And that's just what's happening there, little by little in this area. Now let's move to the Zaporizhzhia front line. So first, Russian troops are advancing in Rozhaine and Staromayorsky in this area. They're moving forward slowly but surely, again squeezing. They, as I mentioned before, they captured Robotine. Officially, this is no man's land because it's nearly impossible to basically hold on to it. But Ukrainian side definitely lost control over it. Otherwise, there is not any sort of points of real meaningful tension on this section of the front line. And then I'm gonna finish with the situation along the Dnipro River, just to show that Ukrainian command withdrew from the bridgeheads, and this 36th Naval Infantry Brigade apparently right now near Kharkiv. And to be fair, the situation here is not like this is full strength brigades in good shape. It's mostly, I wouldn't say remnants, but I would say significant losses brigades. So they're not sort of in perfect shape, and so when I say the brigade has moved, it could be just 2 or 3 battalions, something like that, and the rest is just a support group, which effectively is not participating in the fight. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye bye.